The Dexit, that is, a possible exit of Germany from the European Union, ultimately represents a realistic option that we should discuss openly. In the past, we have already made similar demands, for example, Germany's exit from the euro. If there is no possibility to return to the original treaties and a genuine reform of the EU is not guaranteed, then it appears absolutely necessary to also leave the euro. Especially the economically strongest countries, including Germany, would have the responsibility in this scenario to protect their own interests and set the course for a sovereign economic policy anew. Let us imagine for a moment that Germany could once again freely determine its own decisions. No foreign bureaucracies in Brussels dictating what we must or must not do. No more billions transferred to countries that cannot manage their own debts and whose financial policies are unsustainable. No more EU laws restricting German companies, weakening agriculture, driving up our energy prices, and endangering the economic foundation of our country. Instead, we would have a sovereign Germany that decides its own borders, strategically plans its economy, and shapes its future independently. A country that no longer constantly has to apologize, but confidently stands up for its interests and acts sovereignly. Yet whenever the idea of Germany leaving the EU is even mentioned, alarm bells immediately ring. It is said that this would be our downfall, that we would become isolated and economically weak. But is that really the case? Or could Germany leaving the EU be exactly the step that makes us strong, independent, and free again? These questions must be discussed openly, without hasty moral judgments or ideological blinders. Beyond economic and political aspects, there are also urgent technological and societal issues that concern us. One topic that currently receives little attention is the EU's planned chat control. In exactly 1 week, on October 14th, the EU Council will vote on the so-called Regulation on the Prevention and Combating of Sexual Abuse of Children. At first glance, the topic seems positive and necessary, as the protection of children is, of course, of the highest importance. Yet behind this regulation lies nothing less than a comprehensive infringement on fundamental civil liberties through extensive monitoring of all private communications. The planned EU-wide chat control is a deeply totalitarian project. It would effectively abolish digital privacy. Translated to modern communication, it is comparable to abolishing the confidentiality of letters. Every letter would be prophylactically opened, photographed, and scanned for potentially undesirable content. The regulation overrides end-to-end encryption of digital messages and makes it possible to automatically scan all private messages, pictures, and videos directly on users' devices. This means every citizen would be placed under digital general suspicion and treated as a potential criminal. Data protection, freedom of speech, and privacy would thus become historical relics. The alleged protection of children is merely a pretext. Even the German Child Protection Association sharply criticizes this measure. The indiscriminate scanning of encrypted communication is a massive intrusion into privacy, particularly that of children and adolescents. For its stated purpose, chat control is not only inappropriate, but practically ineffective. Criminals committing illegal acts already use other methods, offline or via so-called dark rooms, that digital surveillance would not capture. This is therefore clearly about other far-reaching goals. Once such a tool is established, the step toward a digital ideological dictatorship is not far off. Initially, private messages will be scanned for child pornographic content. Yet, the next expansion would be easily conceivable. Arbitrarily defined, politically undesirable content could also be monitored. Hate speech, criticism of government decisions, inconvenient political opinions, all could be classified as subject to control or censorship. The error-proneness of the AI tools used opens the door to arbitrariness, intimidation, and suppression of opinions. Massive resistance is already emerging against these plans. Messaging services like Signal threaten to withdraw from the EU market if implemented. Associations of lawyers, journalists, and IT professionals, along with over 500 scientists from 34 countries, warn in an open letter against creating a largely uncontrollable surveillance apparatus that severely restricts civil rights and freedoms. Chat control paves the way for a comprehensive digital surveillance regime that reduces citizens to puppets of supranational bureaucracies. This development is decisively rejected by the majority of people who value freedom and self-determination. Another particularly relevant aspect in this context concerns the introduction of a mandatory digital identity. It is intended to make it possible to trace all private, financial, and business activities of citizens seamlessly. Combined with the planned introduction of a digital central bank currency, the digital euro, and a central EU asset registry, a troubling perspective emerges. The digital euro would not be a neutral tool, but an instrument of power. It aims to eliminate cash and anonymity in financial transactions. With a digital currency, the state could monitor or even block every payment in the future. In the medium term, programmability of the digital euro would even be conceivable. This would allow complete monitoring and control of private consumption, similar to China's social credit system. Together with an asset registry, conditions would be created that could significantly facilitate expropriations, whether to finance war, rescue failing state finances, or punish undesirable opinions. The already approved EU directive on the confiscation and seizure of assets, passed in April 2024, was a first step in this direction. Once such a registry is established, it would only be a matter of time before it is used for expropriations, whether to finance war, stabilize mismanaged state budgets, or punish politically inconvenient citizens. The potential consequences for the freedom and property of citizens are enormous. It is therefore urgently necessary to critically question these developments and focus on safeguarding our fundamental rights. Returning to the topic of sovereignty, a sovereign Germany would have the opportunity to decide for itself whether to follow such totalitarian developments or oppose them. We could independently determine laws, financial policy, and social standards instead of having them imposed by a supranational bureaucracy. We could strategically steer our economy, secure our energy supply, and pursue an independent, sustainable financial policy. Germany could once again become a country that confidently defends its interests instead of constantly making compromises that benefit other countries while overusing our own resources. A sovereign Germany could establish clear rules for the economy, protect agriculture, promote innovation, and stabilize energy prices. It could strategically invest in infrastructure, education, and research without regard for overarching EU mandates. Yet the step towards sovereignty does not mean isolation. Germany could continue to maintain international partnerships, engage in trade, and participate in global cooperation. It would simply determine under which conditions and at what cost these cooperations take place. A sovereign Germany could act strong, independent, and free, while simultaneously taking global responsibility. The debate around Dexit, the exit from the euro, and the totalitarian tendencies in chat control and digital identity are closely interconnected. They concern citizens' freedom, state autonomy, and the ability to independently decide the future of our country. If we do not critically examine these developments and actively engage, we risk that fundamental rights and freedoms will gradually be restricted. It is therefore urgently necessary that we inform ourselves, discuss, and form a well-founded opinion. We must carefully weigh the advantages and disadvantages of exiting the EU, leaving the euro, and the risks of digital surveillance. Only in this way can we ensure that Germany becomes a country that is sovereign, confident, and free, and that protects the freedom and privacy of its citizens. In summary, the challenges facing Germany are complex and multifaceted. They concern economic, political, technological, and societal areas. The discussion about Dexit, the euro, and digital surveillance is not just theoretical. It directly affects the daily lives of every individual. A sovereign Germany could act independently, shape its future, and protect the freedom of its citizens. This is the goal we should pursue seriously.